Tonight, our main speaker is Kevin. Help me welcome Kevin.
Hi, everybody. Kevin, alcoholic. Also was a pretty good drug fiend, too. So welcome to all you new people. Less than a year, that's wonderful. I had a sponsor when I first started. I asked Mitch. He was a old Vietnam vet guy. He's no longer with us. He says, be prepared because your life is now going to become an adventure. So the people in your first year, it's an adventure. I remember the first year, I deal with alcoholism, so my brain is kind of messed up. And I always knew this. I always knew it. I ended up on that guy's living room rug a few times just going, dude, I'm going out of my head and I need to do something, right? I either needed to drink or take other substances or something to stop this from going. And he always, every time I got through one of those little hardships that first year, I felt myself just a little bit stronger, just a little bit stronger. So all you guys, you hang in there. Your life becomes an adventure. I was going to die this way. Let me just put, and I was hoping to die those last few years, waking up in the morning, coming to wherever, wondering, I did it again. I didn't want to wake up. Here I am again. Here we go, another day. Another day of hopelessness because I couldn't stop what I was doing. I got a few things here. They're just sheet notes. Before I get into my story, I want to talk to you about Alcoholics Anonymous and what it is, what I see in it. Because there's a lot of new people here, and there's two things. Carry this message to alcoholics who still suffers. I was suffering. I wanted to die. I told you that. I was a tweaker. I was a drinker. I was everything. And I no longer wanted to live because this is the way I was. The doctor's opinion, if you want to read it sometimes, it's really interesting. It says that my life was the only normal one. I started drinking when I was this kid. I grew up in a little northern town in northern Maine, no traffic lights. It was potatoes and a paper mill. There was a lot of drinking going on. My mom and dad didn't drink a lot at all. So they didn't understand me and I didn't understand them. But it was a very French, Catholic, strict area. So they served wine at church. So we had these Sunday dinners, and I want to tell you about alcoholism with me. My mom would walk around that big table and pour glasses of wine for everybody, and I'm small, right? And I'm feeling not right. I was always different. And just a young kid drinking this much wine, I could feel it. I don't know if any of you can relate. Just going, right? Right through the arms, right? Through the arms, right down the legs, and I became somebody else. I remember that. And you know what? That didn't come up until I was working my steps, when my sponsor said, let's go back. And I went back, and that came to me. That feeling came to me. And I chased that for 35, 40 years after that. Could never quite relive that. Sometimes I did. Most of the time it was not. You got to get the right balance. And sometimes you black out. Sometimes you don't have enough. Most of the times you're just miserable anyway. It just didn't matter. So Alcoholics Anonymous, my sobriety date is May 15, 2010. So I just celebrated 10 years. Yeah. Thank you. Those people, you think about this. Somebody, Shari over there, picked up a 24-hour chip. I carry two in my pocket. I carry my yearly one, and I carry a 24-hour chip because every one of us in here today, this is it. This is all we got. If I go to bed, I heard an old-timer say this, he's no longer with us. If you go to bed tonight, sober, you've done Alcoholics Anonymous perfectly for that day. Right? I carry this with me all the time, and I always have to get a new one because I give these guys away. I come across somebody who's shaking, who's miserable, who needs something, and he doesn't know what it is. I give him one of these. Keep this in your pocket at all times. So I've been carrying this since day one, these two things, and I just put this away at the end of the year, and I'll get another one at the end of the year. So start carrying chips around. It helps you when you're going through a tough time. I can reach in my pocket and I get this, and if I can make it through today, I'm okay. Alcoholics Anonymous to me is important, and here's why. We 180 countries. We're in 180 nations, right? It's translated into over 71 languages. And I had the opportunity, I was very fortunate. I was being a GSR 2013, and I was up in Flagstaff. If anybody of you that know the Navajo language, it's not a written language. It's only spoken. I get a little weird here. I was working on this back then, and we were making our votes to try to get it going. And I was at a pre-conference assembly in Flagstaff, 250 people in a room, and they just finished doing the 12 steps in the Navajo language on tape, recording. And you could have heard a pin drop. And that was the first time they said it. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. A Navajo guy was doing the 12 steps Alcoholics Anonymous in the Navajo language. This is what we do here. I found a purpose for my life, and I didn't know I had one. I didn't know. But it's for God's people, God's kids. You and I are all God's kids. And all we're doing is we're doing this for free and for fun. Now, having said that, I want to talk about the 180 nations. You know, when we put $1 in the basket, that thing travels around the world. I'm the treasurer for the sub-district here, and I'm a treasurer for the Saturday night meeting. I count every penny, right down to the penny. You put 3 nickels in there, I count it. You put $1 in there, I count it. You put $2 in there, I count it. That money travels the world, and it helps everybody. There's countries that are kind of not as free as us, and their government doesn't like the God thing, and their government. We have people going into that country and bringing the AA message to everybody. So that 15 cents you throw in there travels the world, and I love that. I absolutely love that. I was talking about when I was a kid drinking that wine and had that feeling come over me. And then the first time I got really drunk, I was like 12 years old. Me and my friend, little redhead, we broke into her father's place, and we found a bottle of slow gin, and we drank it. That was the first time I got drunk, and that was the very first time I blacked out too. I don't remember much at all. Got in terrible trouble. She remembers more than I did, and from that day on, I'm not fond of blackouts. You miss some stuff that you'd rather not, right? I remember coming to here and there, but walking home. I'm in a small town. My dad picks me up off the side of the road. I'm half-dressed, drunk, throwing up all over myself. And that was the beginning of the trust issue with my mom and dad. I didn't think about how much I hurt them. And in this small town, I didn't think how much I hurt their reputation. I didn't think about what the consequences were going to be. I didn't think about anything. My only thought getting out of that was going to see Karen and saying, how are we going to do this and not get caught? That was my, I put everybody else out of my head. My only thought was, how am I going to continue to do this and get away with it? And that started it. And for years and years, it went that way. All through high school, it was big parties, the keg parties. I'm just qualifying at the moment. I graduated and I moved to Connecticut and started working there. And that's where it really got serious. The blackouts came. I had lots of, I like the analogy of car wrecking, When the very first wreck I got in, I totaled 3 cars. I passed out and I blew away 3 cars. And, that was very serious. And I'm going, holy shit, what did I just do? After the second and the third and the fourth accident, it becomes normal, right? Things just become normal. This is just the way they are. And that's what happened to me. In Connecticut, it was just the way they were. One more thing. I'm leaving New Britain, Connecticut. It's 2 in the morning. I'm drunker than hell. I'm on my motorcycle. And I'm coming 72 and 80 comes together. And I'm watching this car next to me, and I look up, and there's a semi there. I'm drunker than hell, and I hit that semi, went on a motorcycle, and I bounced. I went down the road, and I was in shock for days. Didn't stop anything, did it? Not for me. I kept going and going and going. So, I could go through stories like this forever, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to talk about what this has done for me. I keep a little cheat sheet here. This is from my sponsor. I sit with them on now and again, and I want to tell you how easy this is. Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps. This is my little cheat sheet. I got step 4 right here, and I got step 1, 2, and 3 right here. It's how easy it can get sometimes. I moved around Connecticut. I remember getting married. I remember my wife, I met her in Prescott, actually, a long, long time ago. I came up to Prescott. I was working up here. I was living in Phoenix. Walked into a bar and met her there. She was a bartender. Proceeded, and the only thing I liked was we drank well together. We could drink and drink and drink. A few kids later, we were down in Phoenix, and things got nasty there in Phoenix. We were drinking every day. I was drinking every day. And I remember a friend across the street came over. I wasn't a young guy. A lot of you people get into drugs early. I got into cocaine and different things, marijuana and all that stuff as a young kid. But the hard stuff the methamphetamine didn't start till 37. I remember it was a New Year's Day. I had a great job. I was driving tanker trucks. I got a call from across the street. My neighbor, he goes, I got a friend of mine. We want to come over and have some drinks. And I said, come on over. Yeah. And he pulls out this little glass pipe, and I said, what the fuck are you going to do with that, He goes, you're not, where are you from? That's what his question was. And my wife and I, we started there with the methamphetamine. And our life just took a dive. It just took a shit. And it went bad. I lost careers. I lost cars. We lost the house. We lost our vehicles. We lost everything. And the funny part about the drug lifestyle is the deeper we got into it, the weirder the people became, right? Okay? Yeah. And I didn't like my drug dealers because they were never on time. So I decided, what's the good thing to do? Well, why don't I start doing that? So it just continually went south from there. And it went back and forth, heavy drugs and then heavy drinking, heavy drugs, heavy drinking. I got a mind thing going on. It's called insanity when it deals with alcoholism. The book calls it, I have this allergy of the body and this obsession of the mind. If I could just stop, right? If I don't put alcohol in my body, that allergy doesn't kick in, and I don't want to drink it, and I just continue to drink, right? I have one or two. There's a scientific thing, I'm not going to go into it, but my body craves more and more and more. And the big book tells me if it was as simple as putting down the drink, none of us would have to be here, right? It all happens up here. My obsession says I can do it again. I can do it one more time. Go ahead, smoke a joint, Kevin. It's going to be okay. All right, take a pill. It's going to be fine. Just one beer. Just one beer, and that went on for years. The guilt and remorse and all that stuff that comes with the 4-step. I used to wake up every morning, coming to, and construction trade, you just drink, right? So you drink, you get drunk, you black out, you pass out, you get up the next day, and you promise yourself with every fiber of your being, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore, right? Every morning I would say that same prayer. I am not doing this again. By noon, 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, we're starting to roll up. We're starting to roll up, and I'm ready to start again. There's nothing in this world that could stop me from doing that. We would hit the bar. Well, usually it's in the truck. Get in the truck, open the cooler, start drinking, head to the bar, and start again. And the same insanity night after night after night after night. And this went on for decades. It really did. And we left things just our bottom opened up on us. Everything went to south in Phoenix. So me and the boys, we moved up here, and we were separated, me and the wife. We came up here. We had nowhere else to go. We had a way to get out of things, and it was another geographical run, right? And I came up here and I said, no more. I'm done. So I went in the daily work, daily place. I found some people I really liked. I wasn't using, I wasn't drinking, and I worked hard, and they gave me a job, and I met somebody on that job, and I knew. I knew exactly. I looked at that guy, and I said, you're hiding something from me, and I want some. And that started another run for years. The thing was, In my head, I always knew I'm different. There's something wrong with me, and I was always looking for the way out, right? You know, I'd wake up, do it again. But I'm in the back of my mind, I was telling myself, there's a way out. There has to be a way out of this. This is nuts, right? So in this town, I always thought that in a city you can run, you can hide really well in a city. You can. You can do all sorts of crap in a city and get away with it. Up here, I knew things were going to get nasty up here. I said, I'm in a small town. I'm running. I'm doing some crazy shit. I'm running stuff from Chino and Prescott Valley. I said, things are going to happen, right? It's just a matter of time. And I ran through this, and it was a matter of time. I was talking to Kirk a while ago. There's a certain organization in town. They're drug enforcement officers, and I had left a place up in Thumb Butte, and I was on my way home. I'm running stop signs. I'm angry. I'm high. I'm doing all sorts of stupid shit. And they were looking for a. It was a legitimate case of mistaken identity. I had this big, beautiful Lincoln Town Car, and they were looking for one. They weren't looking for mine, but they were looking for one in that neighborhood, and they thought it was me. I'm going to call these God shots now. From now on, I'm going to talk about God shots. I came down to town, and my little boy is sitting he's looking at me, and as I pull in the driveway, but behind me, I wasn't paying attention. Behind me, there's like 8 other cars, police officers, and those pant guys were there too, and they started asking me questions, are you this guy? And I said, no, not me. Are you this? Are you this? We're going to search your car. And I'm thinking to myself, it might not be a good idea. I went to jail that night, okay? My first DUI. My last 2007 and 2008 was my bottoms, what I'm going to call my God shot, my bottoms. This is what happened, how I got in Alcoholics Anonymous now. That one was the first one. I went to jail that night, and they said they found something in my car. I got an attorney, and we got that thing thrown out. Right, that's fine. He goes, now we're going to start working on your DUI. We're going to get that thrown out too, because that wasn't a good arrest, right? Because they were looking, whatever. I'm not an attorney. He was doing his deal, and I was paying him for it, so that was good. So in 2007 and 2008, within a 10-month period, I got 3. I was fighting that first one. I got it in August. April of that next year, I got number 2. Right? On my way to work, 8:30 in the morning, I'm drunk. I was drinking rum and cokes all night. Had a big old line, and all of those that know drugs. When you take a big old line right before you go to work, all you're going to do is get higher, right? So I get pulled over, and there's nothing going on but me getting higher. It was an amazing morning. So I went to jail again, and that was number 2. My attorney says, "You're fucking yourself." I said, "Yeah, I know I am." 2 weeks later, I got number 3. Boom, God shot. 3 different authority figures. One was Pant, the next one was the DPS. She pulled me over because my cracked windshield, but I was getting high, and I was going to jail. I had some rum and cokes that morning. She goes, "You're a mess. Get out of the car." I said, "Yeah, okay." 2 weeks later, same thing. Left a girlfriend of mine house on my way home. He said I never used a signal light. I don't give a shit. I probably didn't. Number 3, you've been drinking? Yep. Okay. So I'm going to jail. And I knew it. And my attorney says, "Dude, you're going to need to find somebody else here." And I did. It was the cowboy. I'm not going to throw names out, but he was a cowboy in town here. And I said, "I'm going to really need your help." And he goes, "Yeah, you need help, but I'm only part of it." And that's another God shot. That guy saved my ass. I remember going about things, and we were sitting, in the courthouse here. You got the bottom floor, and that's where everything happens. You're down at the bottom, the library's there, the courthouse is there. This is where you're sitting with your attorneys and the prosecutors, and everything happens in that little area down the bottom floor. And I was sitting there going, what the hell is going to happen? And he came up to me, sat down, he goes, prosecution wants you in prison for 18 months. And I'm thinking, well, shit, it's not, I don't want to do this, and I got 4 kids, we're living on Palm Butte. I told them, I said, I only have one thing left to do. I said, I'm going to go home. I'm going to load those 4 kids in the car, and I'm getting the fuck out of here. And he goes, stop. He goes, stop just for a minute. Let me go make a phone call. Let me go talk to this prosecutor. Not a phone call. He goes, let me go talk to the prosecutor. So I had a good job at the time and all this stuff, and I had things were going for me, and I believe it was the kids. Another God shot. I believe it was the kids that came back, because that attorney came back and goes, we need to talk. So I went and sat down. He goes, we talked it over. He goes, the judge is going to make the final decision on fines and everything else, but we made a plea agreement. He goes, you're going to do some county jail, and you're going to be in the work release program. You're going to be able to go to work and come back at night. I looked at him and I said, how did you pull that off? He goes, just shut your mouth and sign this paper. And I did. We walked in the court, and he said something to the judge. He said, Kevin here knows he's got an alcohol problem, and he's going to be seeking help. And as you see from the court papers, there's alcohol involved, and he's going to seek help. And I'm thinking to myself, at the time, I'm thinking, he was making a lot of sense. I said, dude, in my head, I'm going, dude, you're doing all right. I like this, He was correct. He was correct. I went and I spent my time, went to work, got out, went to work, got out. One thing I realized when I was spending time in jail, that I don't want to do this. I do not want to do this. I don't know if I was done at the time. I really don't, because I got out and I wasn't. But something happened in that jail. I was talking to people, and I realized sitting there, I'm missing the kids. I can only go out to get to work. Cab is coming to get me every day, bringing me back at night. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to live this way. I remember saying that in jail, I don't want to live this way. We get those, and jail was the easy part. Let me tell you, I don't know if any of you know this. Jail is the easy part. They tuck you in at night. They wake you up every morning. They give you clean clothes every day. They feed you 3 times a day. All you got to do is wash the floors. It was easy. It was easy, but that's not something I wanted to do. And I remember getting out, and one of the things was, he says, the judge says, one of your consequences was you're going to go see a drug counselor, drug alcohol counselor / Guy's name was Rex. I didn't know. He was one of us. I didn't find that out till months and months later. I went to see him, and I gave him another $1,000. The judge gave me a $12,500 fine for all this. Took me 5 years to pay that damn thing off. Every month, I could have mailed it in, I could have done anything. Every month, I walked into that courthouse, I walked to the bottom floor, and I walked up to those ladies behind the counter, and I gave them $205 in cash. And I did that for 5 years. I wanted it clear in my head that I didn't want to do this stuff anymore. Right? So I walked in there every month and paid them off. And I remember those last few months, and, there was 3 cases going on, and I'd pay off one, and the ladies behind the counter, they're all excited. Oh, you got 1 case gone. Now you're paying on another one, and now you're paying on another one. I remember those last few months. They were more excited than I was. I was just doing this for 5 years. She goes, you're down to under $1,000. And I said, really? I said, I didn't know. I'm just paying them. And she goes, you're down. She goes, you got 1 week left. And I went in there and I paid the last, it was $95 right around there. I paid it, they gave me a receipt, I walked home, I walked in my house and I stapled it right to the wall as I walked in. By that time I had been sober a couple of years, and I knew that this was not my life anymore. Okay? I went to see that alcohol drug counselor, and we sat in a circle and we talked about relapse. It was really not the thing that did it for me. I gave him $1,000. I don't remember how much. I gave him a bunch of money too. After our interview, he goes, "You've had a rough few decades." He goes, "Let's not play games here." He goes, "You started young, and you're just getting done now." He goes, "We can talk forever." He goes, "But I'm not going to be able to help you." He told me that. I'm not going to be the guy that's going to be able to help you. He goes, but I know who can. And he gave me a piece of paper, and he goes, there's a meeting up here at Methodist Church at the time. He goes, I want you to start going to AA and just listen to them guys. I said, okay, I lived decades of a mean, nasty life, right? So I walk over to this church, and I think his name was Terry. I walk over to this church, and I get there a little early, and there's this black guy outside, and he's cleaning up a little, he came right up to me, and he's smiling, and he's happy, and I haven't seen that in a long fucking time. Okay? People that are happy and smiling. He came up to me, shook my hand. I think his name was Terry. I haven't seen him since. He goes, how you doing? I said, I'm all right. I said, I'm looking for the Ruth room. He goes, you're looking for a meeting? I said, yep. And he brought me into the room, and he introduced me to that chair. I don't remember the guy's name. I said, my name's Kevin. I was told to come here. What do you guys want from me? That's what was my legitimate question. What do you guys want from me? Because the consequences were this high. Remember the fines, $12,000. They revoked my license for 3 years. I had to get the blow and go in my car. So it took 4 years before I had a regular license back. It took 5 years to pay that fine off. I did the MAD stuff. I did the counseling stuff. Consequences went on, and at the beginning, I thought these are never going to end. And I got a great piece of advice in Alcoholics Anonymous. Why don't you just do this one day at a time? Why don't you just pay that fine off 1 month at a time? Just do that, just one day at a time. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. And that's what I did. One day at a time, turned into months, turned into years. All those consequences today are gone. I was able to get what we were talking about here earlier, I was able to get a fingerprint card. I was able to get a good job. I was able to do things that I was never able to do in my drinking and using days. Never. I went and I got a hold of a guy named Mitch, and somebody was celebrating 7 months tonight. I don't suggest this. My first 7 months, I remember it was 7 months to the day, and this was going crazy. I lived on Thumb Butte. I went up. I should have went to a meeting, and I should have picked up my 7-month chip, but I didn't. I went home. I tucked the kids in bed. I told my oldest son I'm going for a walk. I ended up at the bowling alley drinking Wild Turkey. So that's what I did on my 7 months. So I'm glad you are here. And I was, for the next 11 months, it wasn't a good thing. It was anything, anybody, anytime. I just didn't care. And I went nuts for the next 11 months. And then that last night was probably one of the worst nights of my life. I was at home, I'm Butte, drunk, I'm fighting with my neighbor, I'm yelling at my ex-wife, and I'm trying to pick a fight with my 18-year-old son. Those are incomprehensible demoralization effects right there. It was nasty. And I'm come on. You're 40-something and you're picking a fight with an 18-year-old. I made my amends. Me and him we have a great relationship today. But that was one of the worst things I had ever done. The next day I ended up at a meeting, and from that day forward, I haven't had it necessary to take a drink of alcohol. But it wasn't simple stuff. It wasn't simple. Like I said at the beginning, alcoholism, my life had become unmanageable. My thinking had become unmanageable. I'm going to tell you what happened to me in here, what changed, because there's a little story. I like Alcoholics Anonymous history, and I hope you don't mind. In the big book, it talks about Bill Wilson and Bob Smith getting together and starting Alcoholics Anonymous. Who came to Bill Wilson's house was a guy named Ebby. Who brought it to Ebby was a guy named Rowan Hazard. I want to go way, way back to 1909 in Worcester, a little nervous here, in Massachusetts at Clark College. I'm not even going to try it anymore. You probably heard of it if you've done history. Sigmund Freud was a great psychologist. He had an intern with him. I'm losing my train of thought. He had an intern. Oh, yeah, that's it. Yeah, Sigmund Freud had an intern with him speaking at that college that night. The guy's name was Dr. Carl Jung. Probably heard of him. He made it into our book. And Sigmund Freud's on stage, Carl Jung's down there, he's doing his thing, and he runs into a guy named William James. And he's the guy that wrote The Variety of Spiritual Experiences, which also made it into our big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This goes way back to 1909. So Carl Jung is talking to Williams, and Williams is telling him about spiritual experiences and how people change. He goes, it's like getting hit by lightning. Once in a great while, it's been happening since the beginning of time. People change their minds. They go through some nasty, nasty stuff, and something happens. Their whole outlook changes, and they become different. And Carl Jung started thinking about that. So he ends up in Europe, and then Rowan Hazard, who made it into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, traveled to Europe, and he stayed with him for a year. And he worked with Carl Jung, and he could not stay sober. And it was at the end of the year, and he goes, why do I keep getting drunk? Am I hopeless? And the doctor says, yeah, maybe you are. He goes, but here's something I've learned. Every once in a while, a big upsetting effect in life, something in your life can change your whole attitude, and your life can change. He goes, this has been going on for a millennium. And Rowan Hazard goes, okay, I'm a church guy. I go to church a lot. He goes, that's not what I'm talking about. He goes, you need a complete change of mind. And he goes, it's not impossible? And the doctor says, no, it's been happening. And Rowan Hazard came back to the States. He ended up in northern Vermont. He grabbed Ebby out of jail, and they went to the Oxford groups. And Ebby took a nickel and put it in that phone booth that night, payphone. You young people, you're going to have to Google that tonight. Yeah, Google payphones. He put a nickel in, and he called Bill Wilson, and he says, Bill, I've been sober. I need to come over and talk to you. So, I love AA history and how it turns out, What I'm getting at is the total mind change. And right now, the big book calls it, in a matter of months, we can have a change of thoughts and actions and mind that would take years and years and years to do on our own. We belong to a fellowship. It's worldwide. And if you want this thing, we have a way out. Remember, I was looking for a way out from the very beginning. Alcoholics showed me the way out. Right? I came in here, and it's simple to do. It's simple to do. You have to be done, if that makes any sense. There's step 1, 2, and 3. I believe I had to make those on my own. When I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know I was done. Actually, I was still drinking. That's a funny story. I had my first sponsor, a guy named Russ, and I had just gotten out of jail. I'm 47 years old. I've been drinking all my life, right? And I went to a meeting. I met Lucy. She introduced me to Russ. He goes, I want you to do 2 things for me, 2 things only. Continue with your life, but you're going to call me every day, and you're going to read out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous every day. That got me to do 2 things. That got me to start concentrating again in a book, and it got me to start committing myself to calling this guy. One thing he never did, and I questioned him on it later, he never told me to stop drinking. I wouldn't suggest this, but that was my story. I continued to drink because this was my life. This is all I knew, right? I'd go to work, I'd get out, I'd stop at the bar, I'd have some, and I'd come home. I'd call him, and we'd read out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we got to that point more about alcoholism where it says, you're going to change this, do this, drink at home, not drink at home, doing all that stuff. We had just finished reading that section, and he goes, sounds like you've been drinking. I said, yeah, I had a couple on the way home. He goes, are you drinking now? I said, no. He goes, why? I said, well, I don't keep any in the house. I'm going to make a fool in front of my kids. That's my thinking. And he goes, why don't you have any in the house? I said, because I drink it. And he chuckled, and he says, call me tomorrow. And he hung up the phone. And I remember standing there, looking out the back patio window, and I looked at the phone, and the light bulb went off. That's what we just read. And that was my first. That next day I got serious. I didn't get sober. I got serious. Like I said, I went for 7 months and came back, and I drank again. But then that fight with the kid, and I came and I met a guy named Mitch. He became my sponsor. We came from the same section of the country. We were both Mainers. We both grew up on farms. We were both shooters. We went hunting. We did all the same stuff. It was amazing how parallel we were. The only difference, he went to Vietnam and he got his face shut off, and I didn't. I was fortunate enough not to go to a war, but he did, and he came back. And we became really, really good friends. And that war took him out, finally. The Agent Orange shit. It started shutting down his organs, and he was 65, whatever it was at the time. I had just taken a trip to Maine, and this was a big trip. I was having fun. Before he left, he goes, "When you come back, things are going to be different." We both knew what he meant. I went to Maine and I drove back 15 states. I stopped at Bill Wilson's motel up in northern Vermont. I went to see his grave sites. I went to Dr. Bob's house in Akron, Ohio, with the cobblestone streets. And I just had a blast. And I had just left Dr. Bob's house when my sponsee called me. He goes, "Your mistress passed." And he refused the treatment. He was a VA guy. He had a motorcycle. He had a nice car. He goes, I have a, what do you call it? I have a lifestyle here. I have a way of living. And I'm going out on my terms. He goes, if I do what they want me to do, my standard of living will no longer be there. So he just refused treatment and he passed away. And that was his way to go, you know. And Mitch was a tough guy. He had that voice. He was a great guy. But anyway, let me see here. I did all that. On from there. Being done, I guess I could go there. I remember coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And that last day I came in, you know, I knew I wasn't going to fight with my children anymore. I wasn't going to fight with the neighbors anymore. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to do something. And those guys around the table, I like the meeting before the meeting. That's what I call it. We had a little club in town that's no longer here. It was called Serenity Place. We had a little picnic table outside, and I would show up early. I'm on a bike, remember? I'm on a bike, so I would show up an hour early. I'd pick up cigarette butts, and then I'd sit there and I'd listen to the old-timers talk. And I believe that was one of the best things I could do. I sat with these guys day after day after day, and I just listened to them. I just listened to them. And they were talking about life. They were talking about sobriety. I knew their stories because they were just like mine, but I was living mine. But they were talking about their life today and what they were doing about it. And I was thinking to myself, there's no drinking involved. They're having a good time. They seem happy. They seem sort of insane. You know, they seem sort of okay, you know. And I hear and I sit around the tables and I listen to their story. And everyone talked the same thing. They were talking of their lives that they lived in the past, that I was living in the present. Okay? I was miserable. I was a drunk. I couldn't find a way out. But they seemed to have found it. There was a difference between me and them. Their stories were just like mine, but they were happy. They were sober. I was not. There's a part in the big book that says that you reach a point where the only thing left to do is pick up that kit of spiritual tools laid at your feet, because there's nowhere else to go. And there was nowhere else to go for me. I was looking for a way out. Alcoholics Anonymous let me find it, coming through here. And over the years, I got a new sponsor now, and that's what I liked about this little cheat sheet. It's easy today. If you know, I heard all these horror stories about working 12 steps Alcoholics Anonymous. I've never had one. I've worked the steps a number of times. You know, I want to let you know something, that working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor is one of the greatest experiences in your lifetime. But there's a better one. And that's working the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as a sponsor. You're going to, because I went through changes that I didn't see. When I sit down with a guy and we go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I see the changes in him that I didn't see in me. And that's an amazing thing. When somebody, that happened to me, I could see it happen to somebody else. Your eyes clear up, your brain doesn't, it's, mine was mush for the first couple of years. That's what my counselor told me. Forget about the first couple of years. All the drugs and the alcohol you did, your brain has to rebuild itself. Just give it time. So when I started to clear up, and I see other guys start to clear up, that's the purpose I've been looking for. That's the way out I've been looking for. And that happens here. It really, really does. I like stories. I'm going to give you one more, if you don't mind. It's, like I said, I'm a treasurer, and I like what Alcoholics does for people around the world. So 1983, there's a guy named Jay. He was a Marine, and he was in Beirut at the time. 1983, Beirut was a rough area. And the Marines were all at the airport, and they had the barracks there, and they were trying to keep peace, and it was a peacekeeper stuff. 200 and yeah, there was a bunch of them. I think I thought I heard the number 274, something like that. But he was in Beirut, and he was an alcoholic. He was trying to stay sober. This is where the money comes in, folks. It's we like to think money is politics, but money here is a miracle. He writes to GSO in New York, and he says, look, I'm having a hard time staying sober. I need some literature. Please send me something. So they send him a book. They send him some literature, free of charge. It comes from us, self-supporting. It comes from Alcoholics Anonymous all over the world. He said, please send me stuff. I'm having a hard time. He wrote again, asking for some more. Please send me more information. Then he wrote again. He goes, hey, he was using words in the book. It was Archives in New York has this. He was using words in the book. He goes, I got some good news to report. We started a meeting here at the airport. It's the Lebanon Beirut Peacekeepers, right? And please send us more literature because we have a bunch of alcoholics that are trying to stay sober here. He wrote him one more time, and then for a few months they didn't hear from Jay. Then they got a letter in December from a member of Alcoholics Anonymous at this meeting, and they say, we have some news to tell you. Jay was one of the 274 Marines that were killed in the terrorist attack. He goes, but this meeting is still going. I'm telling you this today because as far as I know, the last I heard, which was probably been a year or two now, if you go with your little smartphone and you go and you search out Beirut, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday night, Jay's meeting, the one he started in 1983, is still going. Those are stories that I like. Those are stories that I love because we're sharing the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. The military, they say that 60% of all the meetings that happen around the world were started by U.S. military. Going around, and that's how it's spread. It's an amazing stuff. So tonight is for you new people. I'm going to ask you to stick around, go to meetings, stay sober, and do some work, do some steps, because I didn't get free until I did these more than once. They say, just don't drink and go to meetings. I'm a perfect example. If I just don't drink and go to meetings, I'm going to go slowly insane, okay? Because I'm an alcoholic and I need to drink. I need something to numb this out and to make this hole feel better. And I can't do it by myself. So when everybody's got their opinions, but just not drinking and going to meetings makes me nuts. So we come in here, we work with a sponsor, we practice these principles in all our affairs, and we get sober, we get happy, we live productive lives. I had a lot of weird shit go on, I got sober, and then I was in a broken up family relationship. I filed the papers, I did everything I needed to do to get out of that marriage. I went and I got a divorce, right? I ended up getting 2 back surgeries, 2014, really serious ones. The second one was 4 hours or something. It was pretty serious back surgery stuff. And I got another surgery going on. And then I went back to school. I got a degree, and I got a new career. And I've been working in that for a couple of years now. All these things were not ever going to be part of my life. You know, if somebody would have said 10 years ago, look over 10 years, this is where you're going to be, I would have been, no, not this guy. Not this guy. See, I'm not the same guy that walked into Alcoholics Anonymous 10 years ago. I have changed. And that spiritual change that William James talks about, that Carl Jung talks about, that Ebby talked about with Bill, I wish I was a fly on that wall. You know, imagine Ebby walking into Bill's house, Bill's drinking gin, bathtub gin. It's the middle of a, you know, there's illegal alcohol at the time, so you make your own in the bathtub. Imagine Bill being drunk and Ebby's talking to him about God. I would have loved to be a fly on that wall. And then Ebby said the magic words, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And that's what I like about Alcoholics Anonymous, because one more thing. We were talking about the 12 steps, and it was made really, really simple to me. Where is it? I got a cheat sheet, sorry. Oh yeah, I got 1, 2, 3. Have you had trouble while drinking? 1. Have you had trouble while sober? And do you believe Alcoholics Anonymous can change your life, can make you sober? Because I couldn't do it on my own. I needed a power greater than myself. I don't care how you think, what you think about a higher power of God or anything. I used the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I used Mitch. I used Don. I used all these guys that aren't with us anymore as my higher power. I said, look, if these guys had my story and they're sober and they're happy, I need them to help me. And over the years, all my things have changed. My whole things have changed about higher life, spirituality. I've read a whole bunch of books. I just have fun. What we do here is for fun and for free. We help you guys get sober. And if you want that, we have it. And I like to do this on occasion, and I think I'm going to do it right now because we have a few minutes left. This is for your newer people. I got a little stuck on this myself. This is called An Alcoholic Fell in a Hole and Couldn't Get Out. Okay? Newer people. An alcoholic fell in a hole and couldn't get out. A businessman went by, and the addict, alcoholic, called out for help. The businessman threw him some money and told him to buy himself a ladder. But the alcoholic could not buy a ladder in the hole he was in. A doctor walked by. The alcoholic said, "Help, I can't get out." The doctor gave him some drugs and said, "Take these, it will help you not drink." The alcoholic said thanks, but when the pills ran out, he was still in the hole. A well-known psychiatrist rode by and heard the alcoholic's cry for help. He stopped and asked, "How did you get here? Were you born there? Did your parents put you there? Tell me about yourself. It will alleviate your sense of loneliness." So the alcoholic talked with him for an hour. Then the psychiatrist had to leave, but he said he'd be back next week. The alcoholic thanked him, but he was still in the hole. A priest came by. The alcoholic called out for help. The priest gave him a Bible and said, "I'll say a prayer for you." He got down on his knees and prayed for the alcoholic, then he left. The alcoholic was very grateful. He read the Bible, but he was still stuck in the hole. A recovering alcoholic happened to be passing by. The alcoholic cried out, "Help! Hey, help me, I'm stuck in this hole." Right away, the recovered alcoholic jumped down in the hole with him. The alcoholic said, "What are you doing? Now we're both stuck here." But the recovered alcoholic says, "Calm down, it's okay. I've been here before. I know how to get out." Thank you all for coming. We have a way out.